The fall of Emperor Palpatine marked the end of an era. His death was at the hands of his own apprentice. This was a spectacle that shook the galaxy. Yet what followed was perhaps even more shocking. A generation of Sith who viewed his reign not as a triumph, but as a cautionary tale. For all of his power, for all of his mastery of the dark side, and dominion over the galaxy, the Sith who came after Palpatine saw his legacy as a lesson of what not to become. Darth Krayt, Darth Kaitis, Lumaya, Darth Red. Figures of great power in their own right, they all rarely disputed Palpatine's raw strength and profound connection to the dark side. Many of them may have even admitted that he surpassed them in sheer mastery of the Force, and yet, they did not revere him as the ultimate Sith. His defeat in their eyes was not due to weakness of power, but a weakness in philosophy. A failure to secure the long-term survival of the Sith Order, a desire for control, not over the dark side, but over its practitioners, at the cost of the Sith Order's strength. To the Sith who followed in the lineage, Palpatine was a paradox, a titan who conquered the galaxy, yet left it vulnerable to collapse the moment that his throne fell. His arrogance, his need to hoard power rather than share it, and his failure to properly prepare for successors all became points of contempt for those that would rise from his ashes. They saw him not as a true Dark Lord to be admired, but as a relic, a Sith so consumed by his own dominance that he doomed the Empire to fall with it. Today we will explore the complex and often brutal opinions the Sith who followed Palpatine held about his reign, how they respected his power, but scorned his vision, how his greatest missteps were not in his strength, but in his failure to ensure the survival of the Sith legacy. This is the untold story of how the galaxy's most feared Dark Lord became a symbol both of ultimate power and ultimate failure. Among the Sith who followed Palpatine, few had a more personal connection to his reign than Lumaya did. Once an Imperial agent and apprentice to Lord Vader, she served directly under the Emperor's rule during the height of his galactic empire. She trained both in the ways of manipulation and combat. She was molded to be a perfect weapon for the Sith cause. Yet, despite her close ties to Palpatine's empire, even Lumaya grew disillusioned with the very philosophy that she had once upheld. To Lumaya, Palpatine's power was undeniable. He had brought the galaxy to its knees, crushed the Jedi, and established a reign of fear and control on a galactic scale. But it was in that control where she saw his greatest failure as well. His focus on absolute dominion, on the rule of one where all of the power was concentrated into a single being. This in turn left the Sith vulnerable. Palpatine had not built a legacy. He had built an empire designed to collapse in his absence. The destruction of the second Death Star, the death of both he and Vader left a power vacuum so severe that the Sith nearly vanished entirely, as if their order had been nothing more than a reflection of Palpatine's own ego. Lumaya believed that Palpatine's mistake was not a failure of strength, but a failure of vision. He sought to end the cycle of the Sith's betrayal, hoarding knowledge rather than passing it down. He dismissed the value of a strong, evolving order in favor of personal immortality and dominance. To Lumaya, the Sith Code demanded adaptation, not stagnation. And yet, for all of her criticisms of Palpatine, Lumaya could not fully break from his influence. She attempted to continue his dark legacy, training Jacen Solo as Kaitis in an effort to recreate what Palpatine accomplished, but this time with a new generation, a Sith Order more focused on lasting control rather than personal glory. Lumaya's view of Palpatine was the most complex of all. It was admiration mixed with resentment. She recognized his greatness, but viewed his philosophy as ultimately flawed. A tale of how even the most powerful could doom their own empire when blinded by their own self-interest. And in her quest to rebuild the Sith, Lumaya reflected the very paradox that she criticized, failing to break free from the shadows of the past while striving to redefine the future. But now, let us speak of Darth Kaitis. Jacen Solo once carried perhaps the most complicated relationship with Palpatine's legacy among all of the Sith that followed. Born into the Skywalker bloodline, one that Palpatine himself manipulated and corrupted for generations, Jacen Solo grew up with a profound understanding of the evil that his family had faced. To him, Palpatine was not just a tyrant of history, but the architect of the very fall of his grandfather Anakin, and the near annihilation of the Jedi Order. More than any other Sith who came before, Darth Kaitis believed in Palpatine's pure evil. To him, Palpatine was more than a legend. He was a great power that still influenced and haunted the galaxy around him. Jacen hated him. Yet, when Jacen fell to the dark side and embraced a new identity as Darth Kaitis, his perspective on Palpatine shifted. While he never excused Palpatine's cruelty or his obsession with ultimate power, Kaitis came to believe that Palpatine's greatest failure was not in his darkness, but in his selfishness. Kaitis saw himself as something greater, a Sith Lord who embraced power not for personal glory, but for a necessary evil. To Kaitis, the galaxy required strength, control, and sacrifice to prevent chaos. He believed that unlike Palpatine, he could wield the dark side with purpose, protect the galaxy, never dominate it. This belief, however, mirrored Palpatine's own justifications more closely than Kaitis would have ever admitted. Palpatine himself believed that peace could be forged through fear and control. The difference, though, was in their intentions. While Palpatine ruled for his own eternal power, Darth Kaitis saw himself as a tragic figure, a savior forced to become the monster to secure the order. Yet both fell victim to the same Sith flaw, the illusion that absolute control could bring lasting peace. Kaitis' view on Palpatine, then, was defined by both revulsion and reluctant respect. He detested the Sith Lord for his corruption of the Skywalker bloodline, viewing him as their eternal enemy, but he could not ignore the truth of his power. Kaitis believed that Palpatine's cruelty, while excessive, had proven the effectiveness of his strength, and he justified his own descent into darkness as he convinced himself that he was avoiding all of the mistakes that Palpatine made, while in truth, tragically repeating them in a different form. And now we move on to my favorite. Of all of the Sith who followed in Palpatine's shadow, none despised him more than Darth Krayt, and for very good reason. Once a Jedi Asherad Het and a survivor of Order 66, Krayt suffered under Palpatine's tyranny in the way that no other Sith Lord would. He wasn't merely haunted by his legacy, he had lived through it, watched it devastate everything he had sworn to protect and love. His hatred for Palpatine was personal. It was not born by abstract philosophy or distant galactic wars, but from the scars that Palpatine had left on his soul. Het's fall to the dark side was not driven by ambition or power, it was a turn of desperation. As a broken Jedi hunted following the Purge, he turned to the Sith not for personal gain, but to learn how to kill. To kill Palpatine, to kill Vader. In his soul, he knew that to destroy the Sith, to bring back balance to the Force in his mind, he needed to become one. He studied the darkest secrets of the Force not to conquer, but to destroy the monster who had shattered the galaxy. Yet as the years went on, and the Empire fell, Het's hatred outlived his target. Palpatine was dead, yet the scars remained, and so did the power that Het uncovered in his quest for vengeance. When Het fully embraced his new identity as Darth Krayt, naming himself after the Krayt dragons of his homeworld of Tatooine, his philosophy shifted as well. But his hatred would never change. He came to reject not just Palpatine the man, but the model of the Sith rule that Palpatine embodied. Krayt saw Palpatine as an ultimate failure, not because of his strength, but because of his obsession with personal control. Krayt believed that the rule of two was the isolation of knowledge, the desire for absolute mastery without sharing it. Krayt saw all of this as a path to self-destruction. Palpatine had created an empire that was powerful only while he lived, with no true successor, no lasting order, and in Krayt's eyes, this was a betrayal of what the Sith should be. Krayt's one Sith rejected Palpatine's vision entirely. Where Palpatine hoarded power, Krayt sought to unify it. Where Palpatine ruled by fear, Krayt attempted to rule by control through loyalty. He built a collective Sith bound by vision, not constant betrayal and infighting. But make no mistake, Darth Krayt did not reject the dark side. His hatred for Palpatine fueled his rise in turn, shaping him into a Sith far more ideological, yet just as ruthless. And though Krayt had surpassed the Emperor in his own mind, the core resentment of Palpatine never faded. For Darth Krayt, Palpatine had not just been a tyrant, he was the architect of his suffering, a reminder of what the Sith should never become. The final Sith in the long fractured legacy that we'll be discussing today is the last of Palpatine's shadow, the most tragic of them all, a Sith by the name of Darth Red. Darth Red was a figure born not from ambition or obsession with power, but one through pain and betrayal, a desire for something greater. His hatred for the Sith burned deeper than any other, for he had not only been their victim, but had become what he despised the most, a tool of their corruption, trapped in their cycle that he swore to destroy. Darth Red's story began not as a Sith Lord, but as a victim of the Sith's brutality. His family was mercilessly slaughtered by the one Sith in their campaign for control under Darth Krayt's regime. The man that would become Red was broken, consumed by grief, but he was taken and twisted by the very monsters who destroyed his life. The Sith Order corrupted him, not with promises of power, but with the raw reality of suffering, forcing the man to become the weapon in the name of a dark ideology. Yet even as he embraced the dark side, the hatred he felt for his captors would never leave him. Red despised everything the Sith represented: obsession, control, the relentless cycle of violence perpetuated by Palpatine. To Darth Red, Palpatine was not just the architect of a Sith empire, but the embodiment of everything wrong with the dark side. A man who saw absolute power not to liberate, but to enslave. Palpatine's philosophy of dominance over the galaxy, his use of fear, and his need to be the sole master all symbolized the corruption that Darth Red believed had poisoned the galaxy. And yet, for all of his hatred, Darth Red embraced the dark side, not because he desired power, but because he believed it was the only way to destroy the Sith from within, just like Darth Krayt. Red became one of them, played their game, but with a singular purpose: to end their rule. He hunted the surviving members of the One Sith after Krayt's death, seeing them as echoes of Palpatine's failed ideology, and turned their own darkness against them. He became a Sith hunter of Sith. This was his rebellion, a purge fueled by the very anger that the Sith instilled in his soul. And yet, in becoming a Sith Lord himself, Darth Red fell into the same cycle of violence and vengeance that he sought to so desperately break. Darth Red's tragic arc was the most damning reflection of Palpatine's legacy. He was a man that was shaped by the horrors of tyranny, twisted into the image of darkness that he despised. Palpatine's failure was not just in his own downfall, but in the endless echoes of pain that he would leave behind. Wounds so deep that they could turn a man like Darth Red into an executioner and a victim. And so as the last Sith fell, it was not with triumph, but with sorrow, the final proof that Palpatine's dark influence had scarred the galaxy long after his death. The Sith has always remained endlessly critical of one another, even themselves. For all of their power, for all of their mastery of the dark side, they are trapped in a cycle of destruction, forever seeking flaws in those who came before, while falling to the same obsessions. Palpatine was no exception, and neither were those that followed him. Krayt, Lumaya, Kaitis, Red, they all scorned his rule in different ways. His selfishness, his hoarding of power, his failure to build a lasting legacy beyond himself. Yet in their own pursuit of strength, they too repeated these mistakes. They clung to their own vision of control, their own ideas of how the Sith should endure. And in doing that, they reflected the very darkness they sought to overcome. But for all their hatred and criticism, the truth is undeniable. Palpatine left his mark on the Sith Order and the galactic legacy. His reign was the ultimate expression of the Sith dominance, an empire forged through fear, cunning, and mastery of the dark side. The Sith who would follow could not escape Palpatine's shadow, no matter how loudly they rejected his teachings. His legacy lingered, not just in the power that he wielded, but in the consequences of his failures. Every generation of Sith after him was either shaped by his philosophy or defined by their opposition to it. In this way, Palpatine's influence endured far longer than his reign would. But the cruelest truth of them all, Palpatine never would have even cared. The opinions of those who came after him, whether admiration or hatred, were all beneath him. To him, the Sith were tools, stepping stones for his ultimate ambition of eternal control. He never sought to create a lasting Sith Order, or ensure the survival of any of his teachings. Palpatine's only true loyalty was always to himself. And so, the Sith who followed, so desperate to define themselves by their defiance of him, were merely echoes of a man who had already discarded them long before his final fall. And with that, my friends, and fellow students of the Force, we have why the Sith after Palpatine absolutely hated him. But what are your thoughts about this? And which of these Sith Lords do you think was most correct in their ideology? And of them all, which did you find to be the most compelling in their hatred for Sidious? Stay tuned as we'll be covering more Star Wars Legacy lore, so if you'd like to see that, be sure to drop a like and a comment down below, as well as hit that subscribe button and join our order. It is your destiny. Until next time, my friends, may the Force be with you.